Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The silence before the storm ***. The battle had been fierce. Laser fire streaked across the blood-red sky of the desolate planet, creating an eerie contrast against the dark, jagged landscape. The ground rumbled beneath the boots of the warriors who fought not for territory, but for something far deeper, the honor of their people. Among them stood a figure unlike the others. She was tall, her skin a shimmering shade of silver, with eyes that glowed a faint purple hue. Her name was Terran, and she was the most feared mercenary among the alien kings. Yet today it wasn't her enemies who posed the greatest threat, it was the very comrades she fought beside. Her breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as she staggered toward the makeshift medical bay. Her body, covered in a mix of sweat, dust, and the remnants of alien blood, was beginning to give way to the toll of the battle. Despite her superior strength, there were injuries no alien physiology could fully ignore. A gash across her side, deep enough to expose the muscle beneath, was one such wound. Her left leg, buckling from a previous blast, caused her to stumble as she moved. Terran had fought in countless wars, won battles no one else dared to engage in, but today was different. Today she was injured, vulnerable, and that alone made her a target. Inside the medical bay, several alien soldiers lingered, their arrogant gazes following her every move as she limped toward the central table where the medics usually worked. But as her shadow fell across the room, the whispers started. "She's just a mercenary," muttered one of the soldiers, an alien with bright orange skin and sharp, elongated features. "She's not worth our time." Another soldier, tall and thin, his skin a pale blue, scoffed. "Let her bleed out. She's not one of us." Terran's eyes flashed with a dangerous intensity. She had heard these kinds of comments before, but today they stung more than usual. She had fought beside these very soldiers, bled for their cause, and yet they saw her only as an outsider. A mercenary. Nothing more. She pressed on, determined to reach the center of the room, when a voice broke through the hushed murmurs of the soldiers. "Move aside." It was a voice unlike any Terran had heard in this war-torn outpost. Calm, authoritative, yet warm. She turned, surprised to see a human standing in the doorway. His uniform, simple but practical, marked him as a medic, a human one. The alien soldiers, who had once looked at humans with disdain, now stared at this one in confusion. He was a mere human, a race known for their fragility compared to the aliens who inhabited the galaxy's far reaches. Yet, this medic walked with the confidence of someone who had faced death countless times and come out unscathed. "She needs help," the medic continued, stepping forward without hesitation. "And I'm the only one who's going to give it?" Terran's silver eyes locked onto his, studying him carefully. She had heard of humans, of course, their resilience, their stubbornness. It was this very nature that had earned them respect on the galactic battlefield, but it had also earned them countless enemies. The alien kings had long ridiculed humans as nothing more than pests. Terran herself had never given much thought to them. They were a species trying to make their mark, but often getting in the way of those who were born to rule the galaxy. But this medic, there was something different about him. His gaze was firm, unwavering. His presence, though calm, held an intensity that demanded respect. "Step back," he said to the alien soldiers, who were still eyeing Terran with suspicion. They hesitated, clearly unwilling to comply. A few murmured under their breath, but none dared to challenge the human directly. Terran could see it now, the tension in the room was palpable. The alien king's soldiers saw her as a mere tool, expendable and unworthy of attention. But the human medic? He saw her as something else entirely, someone worthy of saving. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human understood something no one else in this forsaken war had ever truly grasped. "Your wound is severe," the medic said, turning his attention to Terran. His voice was soft, but his touch was firm as he examined her side. "This needs to be sealed immediately, or you'll lose too much blood." Terran clenched her teeth, unwilling to show any weakness. She was a warrior, forged in the fires of battle, and yet here she was, having to rely on the very species her people had mocked. She was not used to this feeling. But there was no time for pride. The medic quickly set to work, his hands steady as he applied a high-tech sealant to her side. It was clear he had experience, his movements were fluid, practiced. In the face of this, Terran found herself momentarily disarmed. She had always believed that the stronger an alien was, the better their medics would be. She had never considered that humans, despite their fragility, might have a different kind of strength. The medic glanced at her as he worked, his expression softening. "I've seen soldiers like you before," he said as if the words were a shared understanding. "You've fought long and hard, but it's okay to need help sometimes." Taryn could feel the weight of his words, the sincerity behind them. It was strange, she had fought beside kings, fought beside warriors, and yet no one had ever spoken to her in this way. No one had ever seen her as something other than a tool. For the first time in years, Taryn allowed herself to relax, even if just for a moment. She was not alone. The weight of trust ***. The hum of the medical instruments filled the room, a soothing yet impersonal sound. Taryn lay on the examination table, her breathing steadier now, thanks to the human medic's careful work. The pain from her wound was dulling, replaced by a quiet ache she could handle. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, of being someone who didn't belong. But as she glanced at the medic, tending to her injuries with a skill that was undeniable, that feeling began to shift. His name was Dr. Elias Carter. A human no different from the soldiers she had grown up fighting alongside, except for one glaring difference. He didn't treat her like an expendable piece of the battlefield. As the medic adjusted a bandage, Taryn's eyes followed him, taking in his every movement. He was focused, but there was a quiet sense of empathy in his eyes, something she had not seen in the eyes of the alien soldiers. It was as if he saw her not just as a warrior, but as a person, as someone worthy of care. That alone made her question everything she had ever known. "You're human," Taryn said, breaking the silence, her voice hoarse from the exhaustion of battle. "Why do you help those who don't see you as equals?" Dr. Carter paused for a moment, then looked at her with those calm brown eyes. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "And I believe that no matter who you are or where you come from, you deserve to be treated with respect." Taryn studied him. His words, simple as they were, carried weight. Her people, the alien kings, saw their strength as their defining trait. They ruled by force, by fear. But here was a human who had no such power, who believed in something deeper. Trust. Compassion. It was foreign to her, yet it felt right. The alien soldiers had all but ignored her since her arrival. She was nothing but a weapon to them, a tool to wield and discard as needed. It had never bothered her before, but in this moment, lying vulnerable and broken, it gnawed at her. She had fought for them, bled for them, and they had refused her the simple courtesy of medical aid. Yet this human, this fragile, underestimated species, had treated her with more care than any alien warrior ever had. Her mind raced, processing the weight of that realization. She could feel the tug of something deep inside her, a shift in her perception that she couldn't fully explain. The trust she had placed in Dr. Carter was not born of desperation, nor was it out of gratitude for saving her life. No, it was something more, a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps the very things her people had valued all along, strength, dominance, fear, weren't the only qualities that defined worth. Maybe, just maybe, kindness and honor could be just as powerful. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, on this planet, in this war. You're out of place. Your people could be doing anything, anywhere, yet you're here, risking your life for strangers." Dr. Carter didn't immediately answer. Instead, he finished securing the bandage around her side, his hands moving with practiced precision. Only when he was certain her injury was sufficiently stabilized did he meet her gaze once more. "I'm here because I believe in doing what's right," he said softly. "This war, it's not about which species is stronger, or which one can dominate the galaxy. It's about the lives caught in the middle, the ones who have no choice but to fight. I didn't sign up for this war to watch people suffer. And I won't turn my back on anyone who needs help, regardless of where they come from." His words rang in Taryn's mind like a gong. She had heard stories of human medics, brave, selfless individuals who would throw themselves into the heat of battle to save lives. But hearing them spoken with such conviction, such purpose, made her question everything she had known about humanity. As she lay there, the pain fading into a dull ache, Taryn realized something she hadn't considered before. She was not the only one fighting this war. There were others like Dr. Carter who were fighting to protect the innocent, to heal what had been broken. She had always seen the war as a game of survival, where only the strongest prevailed. But now, for the first time, she understood that it was not just about winning, it was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. And that, perhaps, was the truest form of strength. The silence between them stretched for a moment as Dr. Carter turned away to retrieve another medical tool. Taryn shifted on the table, the gravity of his words settling over her. The thoughts swirling in her mind were dangerous ones. The kind of thoughts that could make her question her loyalty to the alien kings. She had served them for years, first as a soldier, then as a mercenary, but she had always known her place in their hierarchy. She was strong, she was feared, and she was useful. But the truth was she had never been respected. Never truly seen as an equal. To them she was a weapon, a tool, a means to an end. It wasn't the alien king's fault. They had been bred to rule, to dominate. But in the presence of someone like Dr. Carter, someone who saw value in her beyond her strength, she wondered if she had been blind all along. "Dr. Carter," Taryn said, her voice stronger now, "tell me, do humans always act like this? Do they always help others without hesitation?" He glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We try to. Not all humans are like me, of course. But I believe that if more people acted with kindness, this galaxy would be a better place." Taryn let out a low laugh, though it held no amusement. "Kindness? A strange thing to hear in a place like this." "I know," Dr. Carter replied. "But it's the only thing that makes sense to me. What else are we supposed to fight for if not for the lives of those who can't fight for themselves?" Taryn said nothing for a long moment. She had fought for many things over the years, honor, power, glory, but never once had she fought for something as simple as compassion. Yet as she lay there, listening to the soft hum of the medbay and feeling the warmth of the human medic's hands as they continued their work, she realized that perhaps it was time to fight for something different. Perhaps it was time to fight for what truly mattered. Taryn's gaze softened, her resolve hardening like steel. She was not just a mercenary. She was not just a tool for the alien kings. She was something more. And with the trust of a human like Dr. Carter, she would find a new path. A path that might lead her away from the cold embrace of dominance and into something far more powerful: redemption. A plan forged in the shadows. Taryn's recovery came faster than expected. Dr. Carter's work, though rudimentary by his standards, had stabilized her, and with a brief respite, she was able to regain some of her strength. Yet, the deeper she reflected on the medic's words, the more she realized that her time here in this war zone wasn't just a fight for survival. It was an awakening. The alien soldiers still glared at her, still regarded her with suspicion and disdain. They didn't understand her choice to be here, to stand alongside them, even if it was for a price. But Taryn was no longer simply a mercenary. The human medic had shown her another way, a way that had sparked a revolution in her heart. Taryn rose from her cot, her silver skin gleaming under the harsh light of the makeshift medbay. Her side still hurt slightly, but the human's treatment had been effective. She could move with more fluidity now, and for the first time her body felt almost human again. But her mind? Her mind was still a battlefield. The soldiers were still hesitant to speak with her, treating her as a mere afterthought. Yet there was one thing that had changed: their fear of her. She could see it in their eyes. They knew now that she was more than just a fighter. She had something that even the alien kings couldn't match: a will that could break barriers. But it was not enough. Not yet. It was time to meet with Dr. Carter again. She needed to ask him something that had been gnawing at her for days. When she found him, he was back in the medical bay preparing supplies. As usual, his presence was calm, steady. His demeanor had not changed even though the war around them was escalating. His hands moved with precision, packing syringes and bandages, disinfectants and medical scans, all with the efficiency of someone who had seen far too much death to be shaken by it anymore. "Taryn," he said, glancing up as she entered. He didn't flinch at the sight of her approaching, and for that, she was grateful. In his eyes, she was not a monster, not a tool. She was just another person. "Dr. Carter," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil brewing within. "I need your help." He nodded as if he expected this moment. "Of course. What do you need?" Taryn hesitated, unsure of how to phrase the request that had been building inside her for days. "The aliens, they see me as nothing but a weapon. I've fought beside them for so long, but they won't accept me as one of their own. Not because I'm a mercenary, but because I'm not from their kind. Not from their race. They don't trust me." Dr. Carter leaned against the counter, listening intently, his brow furrowed. "I've seen that. The way they look at you. It's like they expect you to betray them, or that you're disposable." Taryn's silver eyes hardened at the words. "Exactly. But I'm not disposable. I've earned my place on this battlefield. I've fought for them, bled for them. And yet they treat me as an outsider." She turned her gaze toward the window, staring out at the distant horizon where the rest of the soldiers were training, preparing for their next mission. The wind howled outside, a reminder of the harsh planet they occupied, one that seemed to mirror her inner turmoil. "I'm not asking for their respect," she continued, her voice low, "but I want to show them something they don't understand. That I can do more than fight. I can lead. I can show them the strength of a unified force. Not because we're the strongest, but because we're willing to fight for each other regardless of who we are. Dr. Carter was silent for a long time, clearly processing her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured but filled with quiet conviction. It's not going to be easy. You'll face resistance more than you've ever faced before. These alien kings, they're used to ruling by fear. They believe that their strength is what holds them together. They're not going to embrace the idea of unity, of something like compassion or teamwork. It's not in their nature. Terran nodded, understanding what he meant. The alien kings, despite their power, were ruled by their own sense of pride. They believed in a hierarchy of strength, where those who were strong dominated those who were weak. But that kind of thinking had never been enough for Terran. She had seen it in her own people. Those who ruled through fear would eventually lose their grip. It was a fragile thing, power born from terror. But strength born from unity? That was unbreakable. I don't need them to embrace the idea of unity, she said, her voice firm. I need them to see it in action. Dr. Carter studied her, his eyes searching hers as if trying to understand the depths of her resolve. And how do you propose to show them? Terran smiled, a wry, almost defiant smile. We do what they fear most. Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Win, Terran said simply. But we don't win the way they expect. We win as a team. We win by fighting for each other. The medic was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I see. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore, are you? No, Terran replied, her gaze hardening with a new sense of purpose. I'm fighting for something bigger. For a future where we don't have to be enemies. For a galaxy that doesn't divide itself based on who's stronger, or who's born into the right bloodline. For a future where we fight side by side regardless of species. Dr. Carter's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her. You're a dangerous woman, Terran. But you're also one worth following. If you want my help, you've got it. Terran's chest tightened, but not from fear. From something else, something that felt like hope, something that had been absent in her life for so long. She reached out a hand to him, her silver fingers brushing his. It was a silent gesture, one that spoke of trust. Of an alliance forged in the crucible of battle and strengthened by a shared belief. I need you to help me prepare the soldiers. We're going to do something no one expects. We'll show them what it means to fight together, not as separate species but as something greater. As allies. Dr. Carter looked at her, the weight of her words settling in. You're asking for a lot. I know. But I can't do this without you. Without us. For the first time since their paths had crossed, Dr. Carter's gaze softened with something that resembled admiration. The first step toward unity ***. The plan was set in motion that very night. The war around them had been relentless, constant battles, shifting alliances, and the ever-present undercurrent of distrust. But Terran and Dr. Carter were ready to challenge the old order. Together, they would demonstrate to the alien kings and their soldiers that strength was not measured by size, or the bloodlines that ran through one's veins. It was measured by the willingness to fight for something greater than oneself. Terran had assembled a small group of soldiers, some alien, some human, who shared her vision. They weren't the strongest in terms of power, but they were willing to fight together. This ragtag team of misfits, people who had no other reason to be allies except the bond they were about to forge, would be the beginning of her revolution. She could already feel the weight of the task ahead. If they failed, there would be no turning back. The alien kings would see it as betrayal, and no one would survive the fallout. But if they succeeded, if they won, they would change the course of history. Dr. Carter had gone to work immediately, preparing his team of medics and technicians to assist those who would inevitably be injured in the coming days. His knowledge of the battlefield was limited to medicine, but Terran trusted him with her life. He had already proven himself a crucial part of this operation, and she knew that his calm presence would be invaluable in the chaos of battle. Terran spent the following hours preparing her soldiers. She briefed them on what was about to unfold, emphasizing the importance of working together, no matter their species or rank. This was not a mission about individual glory, it was a mission to prove that unity, not division, would be the key to victory. Remember, this isn't just about fighting, Terran said to the soldiers as they gathered around the makeshift campfire, the flickering flames casting shadows on their faces. It's about showing the kings that their old ways don't work. The strength of one doesn't outweigh the strength of all. The soldiers nodded, their faces grim but determined. Most of them had known nothing but violence and distrust their entire lives. The idea of working together as equals was foreign to them, and the task ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. But Terran believed in them. She believed that if they could fight together they could change the galaxy. As the night wore on, the soldiers went over their roles. Terran was to lead the charge as always, but this time she wasn't alone. By her side would be members of both alien and human factions, working as one. They would strike first at a supply convoy that was critical to the alien king's forces. If they could take that convoy, it would severely cripple the king's ability to continue their conquest. The mission was risky and every move had to be calculated. It wasn't just about attacking, it was about sending a message. The morning arrived quickly, the harsh light of the twin suns casting long shadows across the battlefield. Terran stood at the front of her team, clad in battle armor, her silver skin reflecting the sun's rays. She surveyed the landscape before them, taking in the terrain. The enemy was nearby, and they wouldn't be expecting the kind of force that Terran had assembled. Her team was ready. She could feel the quiet determination in each of them. The alien soldiers, usually so reserved and proud, had finally set aside their differences and agreed to work alongside their human counterparts. There was no fear, no hesitance, only focus. Terran motioned for them to move out. The convoy was within striking distance. They approached the target quietly, sticking to the shadows, blending into the rocky outcrops and debris that littered the landscape. Every step was calculated, every breath steady. The air was thick with anticipation. As they neared the convoy's location, Terran signaled for them to halt. She crept forward, her senses alert to every sound, every movement. Her silver eyes scanned the horizon, and she could see the convoy in the distance, guarded by a small platoon of alien soldiers. Now, she whispered. The ambush was swift. The soldiers charged forward, their movements synchronized, executing the plan with military precision. Terran was at the head, cutting down the guards with lethal efficiency. Her silver blades glinted in the sunlight as she moved, and her team followed closely behind. The human soldiers, though smaller in stature, fought with a ferocity that Terran had never seen in them before. The alien soldiers, once hesitant and distrustful of their human allies, fought side by side with them, their battle cries blending with those of their human comrades. The battle was quick but intense. The alien king's soldiers, caught off guard by the unexpected alliance, struggled to mount a defense. Terran's team moved like a well-oiled machine, no longer divided by species or rank, but united in their purpose. It wasn't just about defeating the enemy, it was about showing the alien kings that their dominance was no longer the defining force in the galaxy. Terran herself was unstoppable. She fought with the raw power of a mercenary, her every movement calculated and precise. But it was different this time. It wasn't just the strength of her body that drove her, it was the strength of the bond she had forged with her team. Every strike she delivered was a message, not just to the alien kings but to the galaxy itself. Unity was power. Compassion was strength. The convoy fell in a matter of minutes, the soldiers having no choice but to surrender or flee. Terran's team stood victorious, but they did not revel in the triumph. They simply watched as the enemy retreated, their heads held high, knowing that this battle was only the beginning. Terran turned to her team, her eyes scanning each of them. The humans and the aliens, covered in the blood of their enemies, were no longer strangers. They were allies, comrades who had fought together and survived together. "We've done it," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "But this is only the first step. We have to show them we're stronger together, that we can do this. We'll take more supply lines, sabotage their communications, and slowly chip away at their hold on this planet." Dr. Carter appeared from the shadows, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You were right. This wasn't just a victory for us. It's a victory for everyone who's ever been overlooked." Terran gave him a small smile. "It's just the beginning. We have a long way to go." And as the sun set over the battlefield, Terran knew that they were on the cusp of something monumental. The alien kings would come for them, and when they did, Terran and her team would be the echo of rebellion ***. The victory over the supply convoy was only the beginning. Terran knew this, and so did the soldiers who had fought beside her. The planet, once held under the iron grip of the alien kings, was now a battleground for something far more significant than any single war. It was a struggle for freedom, for unity, and for a future where strength was defined not by bloodlines or power, but by the willingness to stand together despite their differences. The weeks following the ambush were a blur of tactical strikes, sabotage, and small victories. Each success brought them closer to their ultimate goal, and every time they struck a blow against the alien kings, their cause gained traction. Word of their alliance spread, igniting sparks of rebellion among the oppressed factions on the planet. What had once been a fractured, divided world was slowly becoming a beacon of hope. But even in the midst of their successes, Terran knew the real battle had yet to come. The alien kings would not sit idly by while their empire crumbled. They would retaliate, and when they did, it would be brutal. And so, as she gathered her soldiers in the makeshift command center, the gravity of what lay ahead settled over her like a heavy cloak. "We've won battles," she said, addressing the group with a firm but unwavering voice. "But the war is far from over. The alien kings will come for us, and when they do, they will bring everything they have. We need to be ready." The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The soldiers, a mix of humans and aliens, looked to her for guidance. Their faces were hardened, their bodies scarred from the countless battles they had fought together. But there was something else in their eyes now, something stronger than fear. It was determination. Dr. Carter, who had been tending to the wounded in the corner, stood up and joined her at the front. "We've already proved something, Terran. We've shown the kings that their strength isn't absolute. They can bleed and they can lose." Terran nodded, her eyes scanning the faces of her soldiers. "But we have to keep pushing. The kings are ruthless, and they won't just fight us on the battlefield. They'll try to break us apart, sow dissent among us. We need to be united more than ever." One of the alien soldiers, a towering figure with blue scales and sharp features, stepped forward. His name was Kale, and though he was one of the fiercest fighters she had ever met, his loyalty to the cause had once been uncertain. But now, after weeks of fighting side by side with humans, Kale had come to see the truth in Terran's vision. "We've learned to trust each other," Kale said, his deep voice resonating in the room. "And if the kings think we will break under pressure, they are mistaken. We will stand together." Terran's heart swelled with pride at the sight of him speaking with such conviction. It wasn't just her vision anymore, it was theirs. This was no longer a rebellion led by one woman and her human medic. It was an alliance forged in blood and trust, and it was growing stronger every day. But even as her soldiers spoke of their unity, Terran knew that the real test was yet to come. The alien kings had sent word that they were preparing a massive offensive, one that would crush the rebellion once and for all. This would be their chance to wipe out the unity that had taken root in the hearts of Terran's team, and they would stop at nothing to do it. "I've heard the kings are sending their best," Terran said, her voice low but steady. "Elite forces. It's going to be a bloodbath. We can't afford to fail." Dr. Carter walked over to the map on the wall, tracing a line with his finger. "We need to take out their command center before they can launch the full assault. If we do that, we'll disrupt their communication and break their chain of command." Terran nodded, agreeing with his assessment. It was the perfect plan. Strike fast, strike hard, and take out the heart of the enemy's forces before they had a chance to rally. The problem, of course, was that the command center was heavily fortified, guarded by the alien king's most elite soldiers. A frontal assault would be suicide. They needed to infiltrate the facility, sabotage the defenses, and disable the command center from within. "We can do this," Terran said, her voice firm as she met the eyes of each soldier. "We fought too long and bled too much to back down now. If we take that command center, we'll cripple the king's ability to strike back. But we need precision. We need to hit them hard and fast, then get out before they can retaliate." The plan was set. The soldiers would split into two groups. One to infiltrate the facility, the other to provide support from the outskirts. They would strike under the cover of darkness, using the terrain to their advantage. Once inside, they would plant explosives to cripple the facility's infrastructure and disrupt communications, then retreat before the enemy could regroup. As the soldiers made their preparations, Terran found herself alone for a moment, standing at the edge of the camp and staring out at the vast, desolate landscape. The sun had set, casting the world in an eerie red glow. She could hear the distant rumble of engines, the faint whine of alien transport ships, but all of it seemed distant now. Her thoughts turned inward. She knew that the coming battle could be their last. If they failed, the alien kings would wipe them out. If they succeeded, they would change everything. But there was something else she feared. The unity they had forged, it was fragile. The alien kings had built their empire on fear, and fear could tear apart even the strongest bonds. What if, in the heat of battle, they faltered? What if the soldiers hesitated, unsure of their allegiance? The consequences of doubt could be catastrophic. "Hey," a voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see Dr. Carter approaching. He had that calm, steady look in his eyes, but there was something else there too, a quiet understanding. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, almost as if he knew the weight of her concerns. Terran looked at him, her gaze steady. "I have to be." He nodded and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've come this far, Terran. We're not going to fail now. She looked at him, the human medic who had become her greatest ally. The man who had shown her that there was more to strength than power. More to victory than conquest. He had been by her side through every battle, every moment of doubt, and now he was ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time, Taryn felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone in this fight. Not anymore. They were all in this together. As the team assembled for the mission, Taryn gave one last look to Dr. Carter. His calm presence gave her strength, and for the first time she realized that this was not just a battle for victory. It was a battle for something far more precious. The future. The heart of the king's ***. The night was cold, the air thick with the scent of dust and machinery. Taryn stood at the front of her team, feeling the weight of the mission ahead pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. This was it, the assault on the alien king's command center. If they succeeded, they would deliver a crippling blow to the invaders, but failure would mean certain death. It was a risk they all had to take. Her soldiers, human and alien alike, stood in formation behind her, their faces determined and grim. They had trained for this moment, and now it was time to put everything they had learned into action. Taryn could feel the tension in the air, the collective heartbeat of her team rising with every passing second. Dr. Carter moved quietly through the camp, checking the med kits and ensuring that the soldiers had everything they needed. He was ready for whatever came next, his calm demeanor a source of stability for the others. Though his role was not to fight, he would be with them every step of the way, ready to tend to the wounded when the time came. "Is everyone ready?" Taryn asked, her voice low but firm. The soldiers responded with a unified chorus of "Yes, Commander." "Good," Taryn said, taking a deep breath. "We hit them fast and hard. No hesitation. We get in, plant the charges and get out. Keep the comms open and stay alert. Stay together. This is our chance to prove we're stronger than they think." She paused, looking each soldier in the eye, knowing that what she said next could very well be their last words. This is more than just a mission. This is for every person who has ever been oppressed, who has ever been told they weren't good enough because of where they came from. This is for unity. This is for the future. With a final nod, Taryn turned and led the way toward the battlefield. The team moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the rocky ground as they made their way toward the command center hidden deep within a jagged mountain range. The journey was treacherous. The terrain was difficult, the sharp rocks making every step a challenge. But Taryn and her team moved with precision, their silent communication a testament to the trust they had built over the past weeks. They were no longer mercenaries and alien soldiers. They were one unit, fighting for a cause that transcended their differences. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the outskirts of the command center. The facility loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of steel and glass, surrounded by high-tech defenses. Guard towers sat at every corner, armed with weapons capable of wiping out an army in seconds. But the real challenge lay within, inside the heart of the alien king's power. Taryn signaled for the group to halt. They had arrived. "We'll split into 2 teams, Taryn said, her voice sharp but calm. "Team A, you'll infiltrate the main building and disable the security systems. Team B, you'll create a diversion to draw the guards away. Keep it loud, keep it fast, and don't give them a chance to regroup." Dr. Carter stepped forward. "Remember, if you're injured, you won't be alone. I'll be right behind you no matter what happens." Taryn nodded at him. His presence was a reassurance, even though she knew there would be no time for him to heal anyone during the mission itself. Still, knowing that he would tend to the wounded as soon as they completed their objectives was a comfort. With the plan set, the teams moved out, each one executing their part of the mission with ruthless efficiency. Taryn's team infiltrated the building through a ventilation shaft, slithering through the narrow ducts like shadows in the night. The air inside was thick with the scent of machinery and antiseptic. Every sound was amplified in the stillness, every footstep a potential alarm. Kale, the alien soldier who had once been a reluctant ally, was at the front, his massive form moving silently despite his size. He had become one of Taryn's most trusted soldiers, his loyalty unshakable. If anyone could move through this place without being detected, it was him. They reached the central control room, where the heart of the facility's operations was located. Kale placed a small device on the door and it hissed open with a soft pop. Inside, the room was filled with rows of consoles, each one buzzing with activity. The alien king's elite commanders were present, monitoring the status of their forces, coordinating attacks and calculating their next move. Taryn motioned for her team to spread out. They needed to plant the explosives at key points in the room and disable the system before the enemy had a chance to react. But just as she moved toward the central console, A sound echoed through the air, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Get down? Terran hissed, pulling the nearest soldier to the floor just as the door to the control room opened, revealing a group of elite soldiers. Was a trap. The kings had known they were coming. Kale reacted instantly, his massive form crashing into the enemy soldiers with bone-crushing force. Terran drew her weapons, her silver blades flashing in the dim light as she engaged the enemy. The battle was fierce, each blow a clash of power and fury. Her soldiers fought with everything they had, but the alien king's elite forces were formidable opponents. The room became a blur of violence, the air thick with the sounds of combat. Terran fought with a focus she had never known. Every strike, every parry was calculated. She wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting for the future. For unity. And for the hope that the galaxy could be free from the tyranny of the alien kings. As the battle raged on, Terran felt a sudden, sharp pain in her side. She glanced down to see blood seeping through her armor. It was a shallow wound, but the pain was intense. She gritted her teeth and pushed through it, refusing to let anything slow her down. Kale, who had been taking down enemies left and right, caught sight of her injury. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the fray, knocking aside an alien soldier who had been moving toward Terran. He made his way to her side, his hands gripping her shoulders with a gentle but firm force. "You're hurt?" Kale said, his voice low. "I'm fine," Terran responded, her breath ragged. "We need to finish this." Just as she said it, an explosion rocked the room, sending a shockwave through the building. The command center's security systems began to flicker, and the sound of alarms filled the air. The explosives had gone off, but the chaos had only just begun. "Fall back," Terran shouted. "We've completed the mission. Let's move." The team retreated quickly, running through the corridors as the building began to crumble around them. The alien king's empire was faltering and the rebels were winning, if only they could escape in time. As they reached the exit, Terran glanced back at the burning facility. The command center was collapsing in on itself, smoke billowing into the night sky. The explosion had dealt a blow the kings would feel for a long time. But Terran knew this victory was only temporary. The kings would come for them and the real war was far from over. The aftermath of the explosion had left the once mighty command center in ruins. The buildings smoldered, their twisted metal skeletons collapsing in on themselves, while the ground shook beneath the weight of the detonations. Terran led her team through the rubble, her heart pounding in her chest as she fought to keep her focus. The mission had been a success, but the war was far from over. Her body ached from the battle, and the pain in her side had only grown worse. The blood had soaked through her armor, a reminder that they had won this round but at great cost. Even so, the adrenaline kept her moving, urging her forward as she scanned the area for any remaining threats. Her soldiers moved with purpose, their weapons at the ready, but they too were battered and exhausted. Despite their triumph, the shadows of danger still loomed large. The alien kings would retaliate. It was only a matter of time. Dr. Carter had stayed close to Terran throughout the retreat, his calm presence a steadying force among the chaos. He had been her constant companion through the mission, always there to patch up wounds, to offer a steady hand when things grew too desperate. And now, as they made their way back to the makeshift medical tent, his sharp eyes never left her. "We're almost there," Dr. Carter said, his voice low but filled with an unmistakable sense of urgency. "You need to let me treat that wound before it gets worse." Terran waved him off, though she could feel the blood slowly seeping from the gash in her side. She had endured worse and her body was used to the pain of battle. But as she looked at Carter, she realized that this time, there was something different about his persistence. "I'm fine," she said, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Dr. Carter didn't argue. Instead, he simply gripped her arm gently but firmly, his dark eyes soft with concern. "You're not fine, Terran. You never have been. And that's why I'm still here, right beside you." She stopped in her tracks, his words sinking in. The rebellion they had fought for, the battles they had won, all of it seemed to fade away in the quiet moment. Her gaze softened as she looked at him. There was a bond between them, one that had formed through the struggle, the pain, and the triumphs. He had seen her at her best and at her worst. He had treated her wounds, both physical and emotional, without hesitation, without question. And in return, she had begun to trust him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone in years. With a nod, she allowed him to lead her to the tent, where he set her down on a cot and quickly began to tend to her injury. His touch was gentle yet purposeful as he cleaned the wound and applied a salve to stop the bleeding. His hands moved with precision, never faltering despite the chaos that had unfolded outside. You're the only one who's treated me like a human being, Carter, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Everyone else either fears me or sees me as a tool. But you? I see you, he interrupted, his gaze steady as he met her eyes. I see you for who you really are, Taryn. You're not just a soldier. You're a leader, a fighter, a woman with a cause. And that's why I'm here. Taryn's chest tightened at his words. She had always thought of herself as a warrior, someone who lived for the fight, who bled for the cause. But in this moment, in the quiet safety of the tent, she allowed herself to feel something more. She allowed herself to be vulnerable. To admit that for the first time in a long time she wasn't alone. Outside the tent, the sounds of the battlefield had faded. The rebellion was gaining ground, and they had struck a blow against the alien kings that would reverberate across the galaxy. But Taryn knew that this was just the beginning. They had made a powerful statement, but the alien kings were not the type to back down easily. As Dr. Carter finished tending to her wound, he stepped back, his face clouded with concern. You're going to need more rest. The next battle will be soon, and you won't have the strength to fight if you don't heal. Taryn nodded, grateful for his care. But she knew deep down that there was no time to rest. The rebellion was on the brink of something bigger than any of them had anticipated, and the kings wouldn't let them stand for long. Every victory brought them one step closer to the ultimate battle for freedom. She rose from the cot slowly, feeling the pull of exhaustion in her bones. The fight wasn't over, and there was no time for weakness, not now, not ever. As she stepped toward the door of the tent, she glanced back at Carter, who was watching her with quiet understanding. He knew what she was thinking even without words. She wasn't ready to give up, to let her body recover. She was driven by a need to win, to finish what they had started, no matter the cost. You're not invincible, Taryn, Carter said, his voice laced with both caution and care. You can't keep going like this. Not forever. Taryn looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of their situation. I'm not invincible, she agreed, her voice soft but unwavering. But together we're stronger than they think. The human medic had always been there when she needed him. He had saved her life more times than she could count. But it was more than that. In a galaxy where power and fear ruled, Carter had given her something no one else had, trust. And in turn she had given him the trust of a leader who had seen too much bloodshed, too much loss. Their bond was something deeper than just soldier and medic. It was forged in the fires of rebellion, in the understanding that they were fighting for something much bigger than themselves. Outside, the stars were beginning to twinkle in the clear sky, the vastness of the universe stretching out before them. The kings may have ruled this galaxy with iron fists, but there was something they had never understood, humanity's capacity for hope, for unity, and for defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. And as Taryn stood there, feeling the weight of her decision, she knew that the war was far from over. But the kings had underestimated them. They had underestimated the human spirit. We will fight, she said, her voice resolute. And we will win. Not just for us, but for every world they've crushed, for every soul they've enslaved. We're not just mercenaries anymore. We are the beginning of something greater. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.